Salawat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وصلى اللهم على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه العزيز بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولله المشرق والمغرب فأينما تولوا فثم وجه الله صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد.
Continuing on the topic of these series of lectures, the topic of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the first lecture I talked about what is existence from the view of different philosophers and Islamic philosophy as well. And yesterday what had been discussed was the idea of Allah as Wahdat al Wujud, Wajib al Wujud, and the creation as mumkin al Wujud. And I talked about the idea that mumkin al Wujud does not by itself exist. All that exists is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we went into a discussion of hikmat al-ishraq and theories of knowledge. So alhamdulillah, today I want to talk to you about how we know Allah exists. We talked about the existence of God, but now let's take it up a notch. Because indeed, if you read the books of Al-Maraji', they say there is no taqleed in Usul al-Din. Meaning everybody is responsible for their aqaid themselves. And ulama can set what they call the orthodoxy of the sect, meaning the viewpoints of tashayyu have been set forth by ulama. But in terms of my personal faith, I have to derive these conclusions myself. And the biggest proof in creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is creation itself. We say different things in وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. Allah's are the beautiful names. The common tradition is Allah has 99 names. In Dua Joshan Kabir we read 1,000 names. And indeed we find that Allah's names are infinite. What is a name? A name is a reality a name is a sign that points to a reality. I see brothers in front of me right now. If I say Ayatollah al-Uzma Sayyid al-Sistani, you will think of an elderly man living in the gully of Najaf, in the streets of Najaf next to Amir al-Mu'mineen. The name Sayyid al-Sistani points to the reality of Sayyid al-Sistani. The name Sayyid al-Khoi points to the reality of Sayyid al-Khoi. The name Sayyid al-Iqadi Tabatabai points to the reality of Sayyid al-Iqadi. Same thing, you begin to go on, but a name is just a sign that points to the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of creation is a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of existence points to the reality of Allah, about which He says, I was a hidden treasure and I wish to be known, so I created everything. Allah was the hidden treasure and He wished to be known, so He created everything. All of this is a sign of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean though? If I say, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبِ, and God is the east and the west, فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ, so wherever you go you see the face of God, does that mean all of creation is divine in the sense that God is in creation itself? Am I saying that Islam promotes panentheism, that creation is God itself? Or am I saying no? Every created being is a tajalli of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every created being is a manifestation of the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And indeed, when we say وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى, Asma'ul Husna are indefinite. But we say in the school of Ahlul Bayt, Asma'ul A'azam are 14. The names of Ahlul Bayt, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Nabi Adam, and He placed him in paradise, if you look at some tafasir, they say that Nabi Adam looked at the arsh. What is the arsh? These things, arsh, qalam, law, they point to different realities. Some say that these are malaika, but the arsh itself is not a physical seat. You know, Ibn Taymiyyah, may God curse him, he used to say Allah gets up and down from the arsh the way I get up and down from my chair. Arsh is Allah's power. It's all of His dominion. It's all of creation. He looked up on top of the arsh, and they say he saw 5 figures silhouetted across the background doing ibadah. And he asked Allah, what are these figures? He says, Allah responds by saying, if it were not for them, I would not have created you, the skies, the heavens, the earth, and everything, the mountains, the seas, the planets, the suns, the stars. I would not have created any one of these things. I am Mahmud. This is Muhammad. I am A'la. This is Ali. I am Fatir al-Samawati wal-Ard. This is Fatima, and he points to the other two. This is Hassan and Hussein.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
The second time, for the love of Al-Zahra, salawat alayhi.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And indeed, in the school of Ahlul Bayt, we say that, there's a concept in the Quran called Wali al-Amr. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. Our brethren of Sunnah have made this mean follow Allah and the Prophet and those who have political authority over you. So much so that they say an hour of civil unrest under the upheaval of a tyrant is worse than staying under that tyrant for 1,000 years. This proves that for them, they say that you have to follow your political authority. That's why they say, Na'udhu Billah, and they attribute this to Fatima al-Zahra as Khata'i Ijtihadi. That Fatima al-Zahra did not accept the Khilafat of the first Khalifa. She was, Na'udhu Billah, under Khata, according to them. Imam Hussein should have accepted the bay'ah of Yazid. He did not. He was under khata. Na'udhu billah. Yes, they say this. They say this. But we say, Walil Amr means the person who has such good control, extensive control over his nafs, that Allah gives him control over the universe around him. These individuals, and in Shia thought, we say that the world is created for Waliul Amr. World is created for Insani Kamil. The world, all of the existence, if the world is deprived of Waliul Amr for even a nanosecond, it will be destroyed. And the proof of the existence of Waliul Amr in our time, of Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, is that this universe exists. That you and I are here, that is the proof of the existence of Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. Of course, Imam is Imam. Of course, the Imam is at the highest level of the paradise. But we find that we have to try to become insan kamil. What is insan kamil? History aside, and I should say this as a side note, there's a debate as to who introduced the idea of Wajib al Wujud and everything in Islamic philosophy as well, and insan kamil. But my favorite philosopher, Mullah Sadr Muta'allihin, he says in Asfal al-Arba'a, he says that there are 4 journeys of creation to Allah and back to this earth. Min al-Khalq, ila al-Haq, bil-Haq, that's number 1. Min al-Haq, ila al-Haq, min al-Haq, ila al-Khalq, and then from min al-Khalq to ila al-Khalq. Meaning that I start my journey on this world. I start in creation and I raise myself to the level of Mi'raj where I see the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in front of me. And I spend my reality understanding the nature of the divine. And then once I become the manifestation of the divine, I come to humanity and I serve humanity and I make humanity reach the divine. What I am saying, dear brothers and sisters, is that we have to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The hadith says, As-salatu al-mi'raj al-mu'min. Salat is the mi'raj of the mu'min. You know, sometimes we say there are discussions as to how many mi'raj Rasulullah had. Your every salat is mi'raj if you are a mu'min, and you are saying Rasulullah only had 1 mi'raj? No, he had multiple. And there are only few that are recorded. One, according to some our Sunni brothers, by Bibi Aisha, the conception of Al-Zahra happened on Mi'raj when he went to Kaaba Kawsaini or Adna, when he went to the highest paradise, and a hand came out behind the curtain. That was Mi'raj. But all of our prayer, dear brothers and sisters, can be Mi'raj if we try. That is the most important point. It's not good enough that I say I am Shia. It's not good enough that we say we are Shia. What really matters if Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman says we are his Shia. I could pray Allahumma kulli waliyik al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan all the time. But the real test is Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman should be praying for my existence, for my being. Imagine the blessing that we would get if Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman says, this is the Abu Talib of my army. This is the Hur of my forces. This is Miqdad of my army. This is Habib ibn Mudahir of my army. This is Muslim ibn Awsaja of my army. Imagine that. Imagine that. By the way, when we talk about the Hur of Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, the only reason he is not physically, we cannot recognize him, is because we are distant from him. He is here. He is here. The ulama, the mujtahideen has said that he is not on a green island somewhere in the Pacific or wherever. He is the active element governing society, making sure society moves in the direction of his dhuhur. And if we are true mu'min, we are true ashabu sahib, he will make himself shown to us and we will recognize him. We will have the ma'rifah of sahib al-zaman. We will have the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will recognize him and he will wait for us. So let us make that decision, dear brothers and sisters. Let us make that decision to try to tread the path of Allah. And when we talk about history, history is filled with anomalies. If we were given a textbook on the companions of Imam Hussein as perceived by the majority of the Muslim world, we would be really shocked. On 61AH, if we were given a textbook or the list of the Sahaba of Imam Hussein, there would be no room, there would be no Hul. Yeah, there would be no Zuhair ibn al-Qayn there. On the contrary, we would find that next to Mukhtar and Hani ibn Urwa, there would be Umar ibn Sa'ad. Umar ibn Sa'ad was considered to be such a loyal companion to Imam Hussein that he was put under the fihrist by the governors of Mukhtar and Hani ibn Urwa. But when he was born, Sa'ad, his father, came up to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he said to him, I have a son that was born to my household. Imam Ali says, you have a snake that will kill my son Hussein in Karbala. So when he was born, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, he trained his son everywhere Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam would go, he would kiss the ground where Imam stepped on. But this was without ma'rifah. Without ma'rifah. You could perform millions of ibadah without ma'rifah, nothing. And I talked about the human Umar ibn Sa'ad alayhi, Shaitan, Iblis. He performed thousands of years of sajda. One lack of ma'rifah event when Allah told all of creation except Ahlul Bayt to go to sajda, he refused, he became Iblis, Shaitan. Umar ibn Sa'ad, he knew exactly who Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was. But when it came to it, the governorship of Ra'i was more important to him than the Imamat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. On the day of Ashura, Lady Zainab salamullah alayha, when she is at the blessed maqam of Tilla Zainabiyya, she looks at the battleground when Imam Hussein is about to become shaheed. Umar ibn Sa'ad is sitting on the chest of Imam Hussein. She says, woe to you, Umar ibn Sa'ad. He knows who Imam Hussein is. She says to him, they are killing Hussein and you just sit there? On the other hand, there were people in Imam Hussein's army who we would have never thought would be in Imam Hussein's army. One person, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn was an Uthmani. He was a Shi'at al-Uthman. He believed that both Muawiyah and Imam Ali were wrong, and it was wajib on Imam Ali to avenge the blood of Uthman. And he fought Imam Ali on that. Yet when he was following Imam Hussein on the way to Karbala, he would always stay behind because he knew if the son of Fatima Al-Zahra gave him a command, it would be wajib on him to follow it. And once that command came, he followed it to the point that when it came time for Salat, he was from the people who was standing in front of Imam Hussein, intercepting the arrows that were aimed at Imam Hussein and the Jama'ah. And he had that courage, that faith, that when Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was praying, it did not matter how many arrows came his way, he stood up and he protected the Imam. That's what we should be like. Hud is another example. Imam Hussein did not bring 72 soldiers with him on Karbala. In the fihrist of the martyrs, Qasim is not old enough to be a soldier. All Muhammad are not old enough to be soldiers. Ali Asghar, Abdullah al-Radi is 6 months old. He knew what he was doing was bringing all of his family members, his choice members, to their killing field, to the field where they would be killed. Most of the soldiers, approximately half of them that came to Imam Hussein, came to them from the side of Yazid. There were people of Kufa who came to Imam Hussein from the side of Yazid. We only mentioned Hud, but there were others who, when they saw the reality of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, they came to him. What is another example? Dear brothers and sisters, it's very important for us that we understand the fact that it is most important that we have the ma'rifah of Imam al-Zaman. My marhum teacher, marhum Ayatollah Sajidi, used to say, the kathra of your ibadah is not important. The shiddah of your ibadah is important. If you pray all night long and you don't have concentration, your prayer is worthless. Yet you pray 5 times a day with full concentration, full ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have paradise. Please recite Allah. We have to live as followers of Khalifatullah fil ard. I mentioned this before. Some Mufassirin, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, they say that all of mankind is the khalafa fil ard. And all of this creation is a sign of God. I have to play my part as a sign of God onto this creation. Yesterday I mentioned the role of the parent in the upbringing of the child. But I wanted to go further. Khalifatullah is not restricted to insaniyat. You are the Khalifa of Allah for all of the world, fil ard. That means I have to take care of this world the way Allah wants me to. In Christianity, they say, heaven on earth as it is in heaven. I have to create my heaven on earth. I have to look at and find the reasons for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this world if I want a better akhirah. I have to make the change here. And it's very difficult to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you're living in a polluted metropolitan area. That is why, even in early Christian mysticism, and in Buddhism and in Islam as well, the mystics used to seek spirituality in nature. When Saint Augustine came, he wrote the book City of God. He separated divinity from the world, from nature. And Christianity developed the idea that you have to go through the city of man to get to the city of God, and you have to do away with nature. Unfortunately, Muslims have felt that as well. If I want to be Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth, I have to protect this earth as Khalifa of Allah. The nature. Unfortunately, modern mankind has become so industrialized that we forget all the important things. If you look at traditional societies, they knew what was important. They knew God was important. They knew existence was important. They knew the idea of merging mankind with the existence of Allah was important. That is why, if you look at traditional societies, from the architecture of their buildings, whether it's the Safavid or the Fatimids, they all connected with the divine. In India, they had the Mughal, Shah Jahan, who made the Taj Mahal for his wife, Mumtaz Mahal, created that building as a replica or as a shabih of the Quranic conception of paradise. I have to live in this world to create my akhirah. When Allah says fil ardi khalifa, He does not say fil jannati khalifa. I have to make sure that I live in this world as khalifa. And as followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt, we have many examples of Khalifatullah fil ard. Of course, all the prophets are khulafa of Allah. Ahlul Bayt are khulafa of Allah. Abu Talib is Khalifatullah. Abdul Muttalib is Khalifatullah. They are Waliul Amr, they are Insani Kamil. Why? What is the proof? Listen. The Quran notes one dua of Abdul Muttalib as the protector of the Kaaba. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. What happens? I said Wali al-Amr has such control over himself that Allah gives him control over the environment. Abraha comes with his army of elephants. He wants to destroy the Kaaba. He wants his kingdom, his church to be the point of tawaf and hajj. So Abdul Muttalib goes to the Kaaba and he says, Ya Allah, these camels, these properties are mine, this house is yours, you protect it the way you want to. This is the dua of Abdul Muttalib. And Ababil come at the hukm of that dua. His son Abu Talib, Abdullah, they're all Insani Kamil, they're all Wali al-Amr. When Bibi Amina had Rasulullah in her body, when Huzur sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi was conceived, what happened? Bibi Fatima bint al-Asad one time comes up to Hazrat Abu Talib, she says, this baby is born with a lot of barakah, blessings. They say that I could see the toppling of the palaces of Rome and the Zoroastrian temples, their fires were burning, and all of this was happening. Abu Talib looks at her, she says to her, are you surprised? 30 years later, a similar son will be born through you. How he predicted 30 years future was because he was Waliul Amr. And in Karbala we see many examples of people who reached the highest mi'raj. The famous Indian Khatib Maulana Sadiq, and I should know, it sounds strange in Arabic because it should be Qalb Sadiq, but they say it with Ka. That means if the servant of Sadiq is so knowledgeable, imagine what Sadiq al-Alim Muhammad is like. That's why they call him like that. He says there's a big difference between the Sahaba of Rasulullah and the Sahaba of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Sahaba of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. On the mountain of Uhud, Rasulullah is fighting. He's commanding his companions who are leaving him left, right, and center to come back. And they're leaving him. And in Karbala, on Shabi Ashur, the companions say, if we gain life 100 times and our jugular vein is severed 100 times, we will sacrifice our life for you, Hussein, 100 times or 1,000 times, whatever number they said. In the Khilafat al-Zahiri of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I believe this was a Jamal, they were fighting, maybe even Safi. And heads were flying. Imam Ali was he was the lion of God. He is the lion of God. He was defending Islam, protecting the sanctity of Islam. Time for prayer came. Abdullah ibn Abbas, Imam Ali turns to Abdullah ibn Abbas and he says to him, it is time for prayer, set up my musalla. And he looks at Imam Ali, he says, Ya Ali, heads are flying. This is the middle of a battlefield, there's blood everywhere, there's gore everywhere. You want to pray now? Imam Ali looks at him and he says to him, I did not expect this from you. In Karbala, I mentioned the example of the hidden flame. One of the companions of Imam Hussein, it was not time for prayer, it was almost time for prayer. He says, Ya Abu Abdullah, it is time for prayer, we want to pray behind you. Imam Hussein says, you reminded us of the prayer, جَعَلَكَ اللَّهُ مِنْ الْمُصَلِّينَ. May Allah make you from amongst those who offer their prayers. Tonight I want to talk to you about two companions of Abu Abdullah Hussein. The one companion was the one who intercepted the forces of Imam Hussein on the plains and led them to Karbala. He was the reason Al Muhammad were thirsty. His name was Qadr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. When Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was on his way to Kufa, Yazid sent a battalion of 1,000 soldiers led by Al-Hur to make sure Imam al-Hussein is not into Kufa. What is the reason? And you know what? When I say the ma'rifah of Ahlul Bayt, the ma'rifah of Imam, the ma'rifah of Allah, Hur had the ma'rifah. Amr ibn Sa'ad did not. Hur had the ma'rifah. So much so that in one of the meetings before they arrived in Karbala, Imam al-Hussein intercepted Imam Hussein, and he met Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein said something to him, and Hur refused Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein says to him, may your mother grieve over your loss. You know what Hur says? If your mother was anyone other than Fatima Al-Zahra, I would have said something. If your mother was anybody other than Zahra, I would have said something. He knew the position of Fatima Al-Zahra salamullahi alayha in the eyes of Allah, in the eyes of Rasulullah, in the eyes of Amir al-Mu'mineen, in the eyes of Hassan and Hussein, in the eyes of Mashiach. He knew that. On the night of the 10th of Muharram, Hur is at unease. They say Hur was contemplating. He heard the cries of the children, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. They were crying for water. His son comes up to them. He says, Father, what's wrong? One of the members of Yazid's army, he says, Ya Hur, you are the bravest of Yazid's generals. If I heard that you were crying or you were unsure of something, I would be surprised. What's wrong? He says, do you hear? He says to his son and his slave, do you hear the crying of the children of Hussein? Do you know who that's because of? That's because of me. That's because of me that they're thirsty. I was the one that forced them to move their tents out of the riverbank. I was the one who brought Hussein to Karbala. I was the one that all the musibah had to befell about Abdullah and Hussein. Dear brothers and sisters, now imagine the time for Fajr comes. Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, they say that he says, tie my hands up and make me a slave. I want to go to Imam al-Hussein as a slave, as a servant to apologize to the Imam. They say he goes to the Imam. Imam says, Hur, when a guest comes to you, usually they give them something to eat and to drink. He says, Hur, I am sorry. I have nothing to give you right now. He asks Imam for forgiveness. Imam forgives him. Imam al-Hussein says, your mother named you the right name. Hur means free in Arabic. He says, you are the free one in this world and the hereafter. Al-Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, he asked about Abdullah al-Hussein for permission to go fight. They say he said, I want my son to go first and fight. Al-Hur's son and Al-Hur get permission from Imam Hussein. They say that when Al-Hur's son was the first one to go fight, when he fell, Hur tried and he walked and he trembled and he crawled towards his son's body. They say when he got there, Imam al-Hussein was already there. Al-Hur looks to his master and he says, Ya Maulana, what is this? Why are you at my son's body? He says, Imam Hussein says, Hur, an elderly father should never have to bring the dead body of his young son home. Al-Hur, I ask you, where were you later on the same day? When Ali Akbar fell from his horse, he said to his father, Alaykunna minni salam, my last farewell to you, father. Imam al-Hussein lost his eyesight then. They say he would get up, he would fall, he would crawl, he would say, Ali Akbar, keep on saying something. I have lost my eyesight, I cannot see you. Hur, why weren't you there when Hussein ibn Ali had to bring his son back to the battlefield? The second companion, dear brothers and sisters, I want to mention is Habib ibn Malahib, the only companion Imam al-Hussein wrote to come to Karbala. They say Habib ibn Malahib was a chief of the tribes in Kufa. They say when he received the letter of Imam Hussein, his wife asked him what the letter was about, who wrote it, what was it said. And he says it was written by Hussein They say, he says, Lady Zainab is waiting for me. I am being invited to Karbala. He says, what are you going to do? She says to him, what are you going to do? She says, let me think about it. His wife gets a sword and she says, Habib ibn Malahir, if you are not going to go, let me go. I will go defend the daughters of Rasulullah. Habib says, I was just testing you. He goes with his slave. He goes with his slave and his horse. Kufa is completely surrounded by the forces of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad in every corner. They're trying to make sure no one goes to Imam Hussein. They say that Habib ibn Malahir said to his slave and his horse, go further off until you reach the outskirts of the city, until you reach the outside of Kufa. I will meet you there. When Habib ibn Malahir got there, he heard his slave saying to his horse, don't worry. When if my master does not come, I will go to help protect Imam Hussein on the plains of Karbala. Habib heard this and he says, woe to my master Hussein, that even the slave is having mercy on Hussein. Even the slave is having mercy on Hussein. Habib ibn Malahir goes to Karbala. He gets permission to go fight. On the day of Ashura, they say that one of the Na'in, he said that Imam al-Hussein was praying, and he said, oh Hussein, do you expect that your prayer will be accepted by Allah? Habib says, do you expect that your prayer will be accepted by God and the prayer of the grandson of Rasulullah will not be accepted? They say Habib ibn Malahir got jalad, and he rode his horse. He fought so valiantly that he went into the enemy's forces. They say he slipped, however, and he went into the enemy's forces. They say that the enemies trampled over the body of Habib ibn Malahir. I don't want to recite the shahadat of Habib, but on the 11th of Muharram, after Karbala, when Ahl al-Bayt were being paraded through the city of Kufa, Habib had one son, and he was waiting to see if he could find his father's head on the lances. They say that he found his father's head, but his father's head was tied on the neck of a horse. My mentor used to say that Habib was saying to his son, oh son, those were the heads of the masters. A servant cannot be found with his masters. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalabin yanqalibun. Ma'at min Hussein.
Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya